Welcome everyone to the April 8th, 2025 CaRC Staff and Student Workforce Development Interest Group call. It's great to see all of you here. Your Workforce Development Interest Group chairs are Brian Haymore and Betsy Hillary for students, and Tim Middlecoop and myself, Michael Weiner, for staff. Today we're talking about a student-facing topic about graduate and undergraduate student workers within our RCD teams, and when and how to utilize them. What are great roles for undergraduate students, other roles that are good for graduate students. We have two guest speakers. Each of them will give about a 10-minute presentation, sharing some of their experiences and thoughts, and then we'll open it up for community discussion on a number of topics related to this. Be interested to hear everyone's thoughts. Our two speakers will be Kevin Van Slyke from the University at Buffalo, where he's a research computing and data science facilitator, and Fang Liu, who is my colleague here at Georgia Tech. She is a senior research scientist and is the manager of our research software engineering team and PACE, our research computing center. After that, we'll discuss questions that may be of interest. I've asked the guest speakers to address some of these that they feel they can speak to, and then we'll have a community discussion about it from there. And so I think, Kevin, you're going first. I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Hello, my name's Kevin Van Slyke. As was mentioned, I work for the University of Buffalo as a research computing and data science facilitator. I actually got my PhD from Buffalo. So you would think I might have some more to say about the graduate student employees in this topic, but unfortunately I didn't have the opportunity to work for my current place of business, which is the Center for Computational Research at UB. And in the little time that I've been here, we've also not had any graduate student employees. So I think what I'll do to start is give you a few anecdotes and tips and reasons from the other staff as to why we haven't been hiring graduate students recently. And then I'll go into more of the undergraduate student employees, as I've played a pretty critical role in their onboarding, mentoring, and training. So to start with the graduate students, one definite hurdle is the funding, given that at least here we're required to pay their tuition and benefits, whereas for undergraduate students, it's just an hourly part-time job for the most part. As for successful applications that we've used grad students before, one project in particular stood out, and that was a project to simulate the airflow under our machine room to get better airflow to the server racks. And so a graduate student worked with our director to design a baffle system to essentially get air flowing into dead spots that we had found with the measurements. And that was pretty successful, and those baffles are still in there. But of course, everything's layout has changed, so that may need some updating in the future. But that was a success story. And then unfortunately, I have a couple more stories that weren't so successful. So in one case, one graduate student was hired and trained, and the purpose of this hire was to have the student take a deep dive through documentation, really do rigorous testing on everything themselves, and then, report that with suggestions for improvement. And well, that was happening maybe within a semester after finishing their training and onboarding, they were offered a research assistantship through or from their thesis advisor, and so left to take that over this more help desk or user support defined role. In a third case, we were requested to take on a number of similar interns, graduate students from a particular department at our school. And for lack of a better word, it turned out to be a bit of a disaster. There was a long hiring process because there weren't enough positions for everybody in the department who wanted to participate. And then once hired, we realized that most of the students who were hired were out of the United States over the summer. So coordinating with them turned out to be extremely difficult. And the kicker is that in the end, their assignment, which was similar to the previous one that I outlined, which was to take a deep dive into some tools that we have and write comprehensive write-ups. Well, because this was an internship and it was worth credit through their department, they didn't really take it as seriously as we would have wanted, and as some students are prone to do, they just delayed until the last minute and tried to cram it in, and that was not successful. So in those last two cases, we really didn't get anything out of it, but we spent a significant amount of time training them. So I would say that the takeaways, as I understand it from my discussion with other staff members, are to try and avoid giving graduate students user support positions, since really they're supposed to be specializing in a particular niche of their field. Our director and our staff, and myself included, tend to agree with that graduate students, if hired, should be working on a project that could potentially be either published or woven into their dissertation, or ideally both. So some workarounds for that, or exceptions to that, might be if you have a lot of users using a particular software that a grad student who has applied is using for their academic research, then maybe they would be suitable as more of a more hands-on user support for that particular software. We haven't tried to implement that use case ourselves, but in brainstorming, I thought that could be a viable application. And then potentially a grad student would be, well, certainly better suited than an undergraduate student for more hands-on interpersonal tasks with new faculty, such as onboarding them and getting them up to speed, figuring out what resources they need, that sort of thing. But at the same time, we've recently hired 2 research computing data science facilitators, myself included, and that is one of our roles now. So we are not seeing much of a reason to pursue graduate students still for those reasons. But the takeaway, or the key thing, I guess, was to not leave graduate students with open-ended work or anything with a due date. You really need to set firm expectations of how the project will start and end. And, decide if progress isn't satisfactory by some date, or have some contingencies for if things don't work out. So moving into undergraduate student employees, let's say I'll start there with some roles and duties that we've seen success with applying undergraduates to. The first would be help desk duty, basic user support. In our most recent job posting, we hired 3 undergraduate students, and more or less the bulk of the posting was for help desk assistants. So their primary duties were to triage incoming tickets, sort them into accounts, systems, software, operations, run a script, provide us information about the users and private notes, that sort of thing. That was primarily their training, learning how to do that. So we had them up and running and more or less fully functioning there in maybe a month and a half a semester about. And from there, they were able to handle the triaging without much supervision. And then we started training them on how to handle the basic account tickets. So instead of just supplying us with the information, to go and see if they could figure out, some of the simpler questions like, why can't I log in? And we have a script that would show, well, okay, they don't have an account made. That's a pretty obvious first step. So our student assistants can reply back to them with a form letter or canned response and modify it a little bit, and that's been pretty successful. That will the ticket handling aspect of things sort of gets into a little bit of mentoring and how to decide which roles to give individual students. But I'll circle back to that momentarily. Some of the other main projects that we've put undergraduate students on are simply reviewing the documentation. So as part of their onboarding process, we have them read much of our documentation. And during that process, we have them not only look for things like typos, but obviously try things as much as they can. And in that process, determine if anything was confusing or needs to be expanded on or might be outdated and should be removed. And growing on that, the staff in fall 23 had put together a, I guess you could call it a training course for new users. We call it the Introduction to CCR, which is Center for Computational Research here at UB. And we run this through our university's learning management system. So, how different universities would implement something like this is probably going to vary. But for our purposes, I'll just outline what we've set up and how we use the students in doing that and the ways that it's been successful and some of the ways that it hasn't. So essentially our first iteration with this new course, we really just wanted the influx of new data science graduate students who are being required to use our resources in credit-bearing courses to familiarize themselves with the systems first. And the staff put together a series of exercises, quizzes, videos, step-by-step instructions to help them with this. But it's always an iterative improvement process. And so when that course was launched or in the final stages of launching that course, we had our undergraduate student assistants not only go through the course in its entirety themselves as part of their training, but additionally give us feedback again on places that might be improved, quiz questions that were confusing, that sort of thing. And, for some of these students, they're younger and can be shy, and it can be hard to get critical information like that from them. So that's another thing I'll circle back to when I talk about mentoring in another few moments. But in our second iteration of this introduction to CCR course, we had added graded assignments, whereas previously only quizzes were graded. We found users were blowing through the course, just clicking next, 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 guessing on the quiz questions if they got it wrong. We didn't want to be too gatekeepy, so we let them just continue practice or continue submitting responses until they got it right. And that system was abused fairly frequently. So we added graded assignments. And we had our undergraduate student assistants participate in designing these graded assignments, which was helpful. And their key role after that point in these courses had become teaching assistants, essentially. They would grade these assignments that were coming in. And that's something that varies heavily based on the time of the semester. So at the start of the semester, there's a lot of new students trying to gain access. So there's quite a rush and crunch there. And in those cases, the staff would have to step in to handle a little more of the ticketing that students had been doing up to that point, because the students were sort of getting overwhelmed with how many assignments they had to grade. But that's something that we need to address in our next iteration of the course. So before I get to mentoring, a couple of comments on just the benefits, other benefits about undergraduates versus graduate students.
So we're just to
Oh,
make
I'm
sure we have
over
enough time
time.
for discussion. Yeah, if you want to just wrap up with that.
Sure, of
some-
course.
but-
Um, it would just be that because they have hourly wages, it can be a little easier to give them pay raises to increase retention. And it's also much easier to increase undergraduate retention by mentoring them in such a way where you can allow them to work on projects that they're interested in their downtimes. And with that, I think that about summarizes it.
Great. Thank you very much, Kevin. So our next presenter, Dr. Fang Liu from Georgia Tech.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so today,
We're seeing your view of it.
so you see everything?
Yeah, they see everything. Yeah.
Okay, let me
I think if you click swap displays in the top left, that might do it.
you mean
In the top left of the screen we see. Maybe, there was one. There's another button near there next to the end show that
maybe I
says
just
swap.
do this? Uh, um, so why they cannot see just let me see. If I just do like this,
Yeah, and we can see it like this as well if you
yeah,
can't.
let's just do that. Okay. So yeah, so for today, yeah, thank you so much for Michael for the invitation to talk to this group. So this one, so I want to give some like a high level introduction for the student worker program in Georgia Tech, PACE Center. Like Michael introduced me earlier, so I'm a senior research scientist, and I have another role as associate director for open source program office at Georgia Tech. Okay. So first of all, let me give a brief introduction about the PACE. What is PACE? So that stands for Partnership for an Advanced Computing Environment. So the center was created around like 2009. So we are like very much like other research computing center. We provide all the computational needs for our faculties. And we are running as a cost center mode. So basically, that's more like a people purchase credits and run the using the resource in the center. So this self-introduction. So I graduated as a double E from my bachelor degree. And since then, I worked as a software developer in an IPS company. And later on, I got a double major master's from applied mathematics and computer science. Later on, I got a PhD from computer science, specialized in the parallel distributed computing from Indiana University in 2009. And afterwards, I spent 3 years in the Department of Energy as an assistant scientist in their mathematics and computer science division, and helping the computational scientists to getting their codes running on the large cluster like LERSC and Oak Ridge and Argonne National Lab. So I joined the PACE at 2012. So currently, I'm also the adjunct faculty from in the School of Computational Science and college computing, as well as other two roles I mentioned earlier. So first of all, I want to tell some of the history about the PACE student program, OCA program. So PACE started to hire student workers since 2013. So the original motivation is we want to hire students to help us on the hardware related task. So for example, fix like troubleshooting the hardware, offline the bad nodes, and rack the nodes, something like that. So we hired students to start using this co-op program. So we have some students full-time work for us one semester for 14 hours a week. And then they take a break and back to school and to work on full-time as a students. And then they come back. So we have been doing that for a couple of years. The one successful story is that we use one student, and the student helped us successfully build the first research Hadoop cluster for our education, course education using the Hadoop, using the Yahoo retired machine. And along the same time, we also offer some credit-based course because my adjunct title from COC, so I'm able to offer the independent study course for students. I using that to hire students to working on some of the projects and towards to their credits. So in that, we get some analyze some large data sets, log data sets using Spark, and also looking into some visualization part using Apache Zeppelin. And PACE started heavily hiring student workers since 2018 because we that year, we are heavily prepared to migrate to the new CODA center, CODA building. So during that migration, we have to purchase all the new hardware and rebuild all the software stack. So since then, I think we have been rebuild our central software stack for 6 times already. So this includes kernel updates and Toric to Slurm scheduler update migration, and GPFS to Lustre migration, as well as the CODA hardware migration. So along each migration, we end up to rebuild the central software repository. So that was the very strong needs at that time. So we hired a lot of students for that. We also use the student to contribute to some in-house build tool, like say PaceFact, which is mainly the log analysis to understand the student, researchers' usage on our software stack. And also we have this tool called the PaceProBench, which is a provenance-based benchmarks. So we can capture all the necessary information so that we can reproduce the benchmark on the given hardware. And we also use students to rebuild our PACE websites. So the website just released a couple of weeks ago. And also, we also heavily use students to build in documentation. So we build in documentation using Git and markup language before. And later on, since we have institute's requirements to move everything to ServiceNow, we also heavily use students to migrate those documentation to the ServiceNow platform. We also using student to answer user support tickets. Okay. We started hiring graduate student assistant since January 2024, about a year ago. So due to at that time I get some external funding, so we have money to hire graduate students. So this is like a current student worker snapshot within PACE team. So PACE currently have 5 teams. 4 out of the 5 teams we are using heavily use student assistant. So you can tell in the user support team we have 3 undergraduate students. So they are do user account creation, and they can do the because we are cost center, so we need to do some charging account management for both computing and storage. And there's general usage question, how to find your models, how to module system, and how to do the job submission, and how to find your GPU, like how to use a GPU, and how to use a storage system. So those are general usage question, all goes to user support team, and those 3 students are helping with those questions. And we have a research computing facilitation team. Currently, we have 3 undergrad students. So they are mainly focused on the software documentation and working on the PACE websites. The research software engineering team, which I'm leading, has 2 undergrad students and 2 graduate students working for me. So we have the student working for like building the software and building the container, and also building the in-house software tool. Also support the open-on-demand web portal. Platform team also has a student, 1 undergrad student who working on the storage support, because we have new storage we want to add to the system. So we want to do a lot of testing and configuration. So the students are helping on that. So what is general requirements for student worker? Okay, so this is the items I put as the first day when students get on board. So the basic requirements. So we require students to meet with their supervisor in weekly basis. And every student has their weekly, like a log file. So they keep adding their what have done during their work, like from the assignment and what finished it or what didn't finish it. So that can be using as a log. So people, like a supervisor can check in the next meeting. And also we ask a student worker to have a fixed working time. So they have to allocate the time allocated time in their schedule, and then share that as a weekly schedule to their supervisor. The expectation is during that allocating time, they should has the same expectation as the on-campus job. Even right now they work virtually. So which means they should be response to any ping from supervisor and other paid staff in a timely fashion during the work hour. So that's the first requirements in the beginning. Okay, when they get onboarded. So yeah, there are pro and cons to using undergrad student and grad students. So of course, like grad student is like undergrad student is less costly, right? So the rate, I just checked that we still paying them the same rate as 10 years ago. We didn't increase the rate at all, but we still get a large pool of applicants each time we call for a student, because PACE has a well-known brand and campus, and yeah, students like to join us and work for us because they can learn a lot from us. And undergrad students also, they work very well on some well-defined routine tasks. So for example, documentation, user support, and adding some new features to the existing code. So doing your call for students, you can explicitly lead, write down the skill sets you are looking for. If you ever ask people to help you to develop a code, you may say, yeah, I want people who has a Python and the database skills. So one thing I found out, I think that's a gap between the education and actual hands-on experience. Students nowadays, they most of the lack of Linux or Bash experience. So that's the kind of is a little bit learning curve at the beginning when they join the team. The cons is quality may vary. Okay, so I put this 1 semester rule to dismiss students because we use more like a faculty, like a staff's probation period. So for the first semester, I would like to examine the performance of students. If they're low performer, we really let them go after 1 semester. But most of the students here, I think, work for multiple semesters. But we set that rule up front so student knows they have to work hard to meet our standards so that they will be let go. And yeah, lesson then I put here, yeah. Level use undergrad student to build central software stack. Yeah, so that's my experience when we, since 2018. So because back then we only have funding to hire undergrad students, but that is very challenging part, working with them. Because due to the limited capability as well as the skill sets, it's very challenging to use them to do the central software stack. Um, and they also need some more close supervision. So it's more like setting up the good study habit. If at the beginning you set a very good habit, it will be better. But otherwise, they will. So the supervisor's role in this case is very important to set up that good habit. And sometimes they need more trainings. Yeah, but we did see very strong like undergrad student candidate. So yeah, that's all varies. Depends on the candidate's qualification. For the graduate students, yeah, of course they can do more ground up work. So since my team is the only team utilize the grad student closely nowadays, so so there's two grad students. One I use that to she's working on like leading the full software developer cycle in an in-house tool. Oh yeah, that's her, he. Yeah, because this we have very critical in-house tool we need to build to facilitate us to do this consumption model. So I hired GRA last fall, and he basically leading the whole like a database design and all the requirement study, and also adding a lot of new technologies to add on to enhance the projects. So we are currently in a very good shape in developing the features for the tool. And another one is she's helping us to building our central software support, central software stack. So for that one, she was able to like learn some automatic software building tool in a month. So and then contribute and also support end user when the end user has some software installation request, and she's also able to support containers. Basically, they can work as a junior level employee. You can treat them that way, and with the possibility can turn into a full-time employee after graduation. And they're also very responsible and commit to deliver. So because I think they getting the support from us, like that's part of accounts, but also is a part of the reason they work harder and more responsible. The cons is, yeah, they need more funding to support, not only in the monthly stipend, but as well as a tuition waive. Okay. And yeah, so if a funding, like say, if my funding runs out, probably it's impossible for me to hire another graduate student. So that's another limitation there. Yeah, how to choose? Yeah, for GRA. So yeah, as long as we have funding available, but for the GRA, I would say we need to have a well-planned project. So this has to be a written project plan, and also should run through by the multiple team leader to get their like consents about the like say, yeah, that's the thing we should do, or something like get internal approval agreements. And we also have to say justification, say, yeah, why the full-time employee cannot do that, because we lack of the benefits to do it. And the project chooses kind of say it's priority projects. The priority is very high, but it's not something in critical path. So because that's a risk you pose to the whole team, right? So just it's a side project, but it's also priority we need like in next 1 or 2 years. So we have students do that, but if eventually the full-time employee needs to engage when the foundation was laid there, it's just about maintain or adding more features there. So eventually I can pass back to the full-time employee. That's the tool. Um, Undergraduate. So yeah, so the if we have well-documented task for user support. Like, for example, if this question come in, this is what you do. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So if we have things like that, definitely we can use in undergrad students. And we need to make sure their technical skill matches the task. If we use a student to build website, yeah, they need to have some background so that they are able to do it. Yeah, so this is just some opinion I have.
So,
Yeah,
Sherry, just given the time, just if you could sort of give some
okay, just
thoughts.
one, just a
Everything your last slide.
yeah, just a 2-page there. So this one, I think we can discuss more later, right? So I want to say, yeah, we need to treat them as employee and invite them to the team meeting, and all those things can wave together to helping get them to the better stage. And also, yeah, for the past students, so for us, during the past 12 years, we get a lot of students successful launch the industry internship and the full-time job in Amazon, Google, and Levita. And also we get 1/3 of students, they get their work turning into a publication as well. So I just put 2 students, the notes here. So yeah, we can tell so how they appreciate to work in PACE as a student worker. Okay, done.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Kevin and Sherry, for your presentations. I hope this has given people some insights, some thoughts. So for the remainder of our time, about 15 minutes, we'd like to open it up to general discussion. We did have some topics that Betsy and I had planned that are in the meeting minutes or the call doc, but we're also just open to sort of general questions. If you had questions for Kevin and Sherry about their experiences, if you have your own experience to share, to comment on some of those, it'd be great to hear. I do see in the chat, Katya brought up a question when we're talking about grad students, that there can be a difference between master's versus PhD students. And so did want to hear from Sherry, Kevin, or anyone else, your thoughts on what you have seen with master's or PhD students, or where they would fit into those roles.
Yeah, so yeah, in PACE, that's very interesting. Actually, the first co-op student we hired in the PACE in 2013 was a PhD student. And he worked with us for like 2.5 years and become the full-time employee for us. So, but like I said, that's just one successful story we had before. And because that person, I think that person is had a very strong needs, want to change his career path from like I think is a chemistry or mechanical background. He want to change to the big data area. So he joined us and start getting imposed to these big data technologies. Eventually, he get a job and leave us afterwards after working for us for a couple of years. But in general, I think I'm looking more about master student right now, because most of the PhD students, they can get funding from their PhD advisor, and they need to focus their time on their research topic instead of like subtract like to the operational work we want. So it's kind of hard to align the work in research computing data center to a PhD thesis. That's my feeling. It's hard to make a PhD thesis. It maybe can be a master thesis or undergrad student thesis, which is we are currently is happening right now. We are supervised students for their undergraduate thesis, but it's hard to match to PhD. Yeah. Mm.
Anyone else have thoughts? Not just our presenters, but anyone as well. Katya or Kevin, it looks like both of you.
Yeah, I just want to comment this. So especially about graduate students, we also have a program, and we had both undergraduate, masters, in PhD students. And my comment is, when students apply to our job, they all have reasons why they like to work with us. Obviously, it's like an adult going to search for a job. We're always trying to say, "Oh, yeah, that's my favorite." But and it's very hard to just see through the students and say, oh, what he really needs is money because he's an international student, or maybe he doesn't have funding for his PhD program and so on. So, but that's a challenge. They are still very young people and they need to survive. They want to have money. So it's not necessarily they are very, very interested in particular job, especially if it's like go and do some documentation, boring. Right now, everyone, oh, I want to do AI, I want to do machine learning, I want, and then you give them a log file from Slurm and say, well, do this. It has nothing to do with AI or machine learning. It's just like a very boring, maybe set of things, right? So my point is that when with PhD students, just like I think in a way both Kevin and Cherry mentioned, it is hard to find students whose work is aligned with what we do and what would basically benefit them other than getting some money. And I'm not sure about your universities, but my university doesn't want to give any money unless it's really, really needed. So the only way I can persuade them to get any money for our intern student is to say, well, either you pay for a full employee or we get a student who we pay less, but who potentially will do some job that I can do, right? So that's PhD. So PhD students are really not a good fit unless there are some exceptions. With master's degree, what I found the challenge is they are here for a very short period of time. You usually, when you hire a master's degree, it's not like their first month, it's they're already like halfway through and it's only a few months left. And as a result, there's a very little time left for training. So you, regardless of what you ask them to do, unless it's something not related to your cluster or something, they still need to learn. And a month to, depending on again what your needs are, the needs will go to like, you need to train them. And so you train them halfway and then they also work for a couple months and then they're gone. So that's my view of graduate students. And again, you always get them mixed up. With undergraduate students, we at least have a couple of years. And I also see that, for that time, we can at least give them something that they don't know, because undergraduate students usually don't know how to use Git, for example, right? And what I force them to do is all their log goes through the GitHub. They have to, if they are asked to do some coding, they have to submit their code. They have to report. So when I approve their hours, I say, okay, did they update it Git? And what were the updates with the code and so on. So just my view of these different levels. And I would suggest when we do discuss graduate students between us that we very clear whether it's PhD or master's, because it's two different animals.
Gotcha.
So in just one follow-up, so in terms of the short time span for master students, so I think I never had the students who's on the last semester about graduating. So just maybe allowed, like they may be fresh graduate, like master students, or at most like a second semester. So in Georgia Tech, we have a lot of 5-year BS master program. So a lot of students know they get into the master in the fall and discover that in spring, and they reach out to us. So that's could be done. So yeah. So even for the undergrad student, we try to build like getting the sophomore as early as possible. So this year I hire a freshman as well because he's very strong. So yeah, try to hire in the early stage of their here so they can stay with us early. But sometimes the stronger candidate, they can easily find the other job. You mean like from other unit in campus. I think the current competitor for us is GTI, so they pay a higher rate and also very interesting work there. So my student went there after work for us for a year or two. Yeah.
Sorry, my internet has started going in and out every minute or two. Yeah, thanks. So there was another question that was in the document was, is there a particular check-in or progress tracking template that mentors have enjoyed? Does anyone have a good way of keeping track of the student's progress or what you do during check-ins with them?
So I think my template is like I want that template to help me to verify the clock in and clock out time they put in the in our tracking system, in the payment system. So I usually ask them to put a date and then start time and then end the time, and then put what item they worked during that time frame. So I want to have each details working log like that. So so yeah, I think that's what I use for my students, and the new student just copy the previous student template on that. So it's more like the weekly. For each week, you have 5 days, and each day you have starting and end time, and then you put the working you have done during that day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cherry, I think since no one talks, I may talk as well. I decided to be a little bit flexible in terms of you have the student has to choose those hours and work, and I think it's a valid way of doing that, because I also found that unless you sort of check what you do, many students will procrastinate for one reason or another. The way I do not ask them to do specific hours every week. I felt that it might be very challenging for them, but I do every week check again I give them specific assignments, so they work on coding project. All of them have coding, and it requires for whoever mentors, and usually it's me, to be very prepared to meeting. It's myself, so I have to say, okay, they've done this. What's next? They need to go to do, and it's almost like a full-time job too. And then we go through their coding, and I check before again I submit their hours. I check whether the amount of work, the amount of coding they've done is reasonable for the amount of hours they entered. And again, that all should be logged in a GitHub. And the reason I don't require the specific hours, because usually, regardless of what hours they will choose, I probably will not be available because I'm in meetings myself. I can't be, if I have 4 students, usually I will not be able to be available during those hours myself, and so that would be really a point. But running what I learned is running the intern program is actually even almost more challenging than managing people in my team. Because they are still children, they still try to get away with, okay, I want my whatever number dollars per hours, but I want to do as less work as possible. So you need to stay, but some sort of responsibility in knowing that next week they will have to actually tell me what they did, show their work, how they progress on the project. Actually, in the past few years, I had very few times when I had to talk with them and say, hey, you didn't work as much as you're supposed to.
Yep. I will say I do find it challenging sometimes to evaluate their progress against the number of hours they've worked, that it's hard to tell. And there is that rush, because I know with my students, I meet with them twice a week each for officially 30 minutes, although it's often shorter, not much has been going on. But right before that, there's always a rush of things popping up on commits, approval requests, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I know we're about out of time. I do want to say, so for those who are hiring graduate students, is that always including tuition support? I think Kevin and Jerry, you both addressed that. Because obviously that significantly increases the expense, but may also increase the ability to hire people. I know we found hiring graduate students for hourly pay can be a bit challenging because they're looking for those positions that include tuition support that they may be depending on.
Yeah, in Georgia Tech, so both students I hired, we have tuition pay for them. But I do know some other people hire grad student with hourly rate as well. So I think that's some of because in Georgia Tech, we have a large pool of talent. So so grad students willing to get hourly rate by working with us. That's a reality, I want to say. But of course, like if you pay their tuition, they will be more responsible, more commit to deliver the quality work. And yeah, and another challenge is getting their tuition waived. There's a lot of paperwork. That's also overhead. Yeah.
Kevin, I think you said that your PhD students have had tuition support as part of that role.
Yeah, I don't have the details myself, but my understanding is that at least the simplest way for us to get the paperwork through is to provide tuition support. And there may be ways around that take more staff hours, but would result in maybe less out of the budget. But it's a balancing act there.
Any last questions or thoughts as we wrap up from anyone? Are there any other topics we didn't address in as much detail that anyone would be interested in us using as the topic for a future call? If not, thanks for joining, everyone. As a reminder, this has been the Staff and Student Workforce Development Interest Group call. We do meet every month on the second Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it'd be great to see many of you again in the future.